Call the meeting to order first.
Thank you.
And the things that we had discussed at our regular scheduled meeting, this was a pre-planning meeting or an ad hoc meeting that I had requested just to make sure that we are all, that we can link arms and move forward in the same direction with the Sheriff's Department for our own committee's credibility. I didn't want us to be divided and because this is such an important and critical priority for us. So the first thing was personal experience. There were committee members that wanted to share their personal experiences with law enforcement and whether their disability was recognized or not. The third item on the agenda is review of statistics. Jessica had mentioned some statistics during our last meeting, and I wanted to take note of those and then source them. So when we do develop our questions, which is the next item and the last item, Michelle, that we will be asking the Sheriff's Department when they give us their presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Do we want to start with personal experience? And if so, who would like to go first?
Are you asking for personal experience with law enforcement in any capacity, or?
With our local law enforcement.
So hang on a second. I thought that, I mean, obviously any individual has the right to share what their experience is. I didn't think that was necessarily something we were dissecting here in this subcommittee.
Well, we can skip this item, but when we get on let me just get some consensus on how we want to approach the meeting. And I'll share my thoughts and please disagree or agree or share your own. But what I don't want to do is have our law enforcement representative, I've asked them to come and give us a presentation on their current policies and procedures. And what I don't want is for us to make an assumption that they don't have the proper policy in place when in fact they do. And I don't want us to make accusatory statements that we can't back up. So for instance, if they have a policy in place, that's great, and they're not using it, we need to be able to share to them that we had an experience where that policy was not followed. Okay. And but what I don't want to get into is an attack on our law enforcement, especially if it wasn't something that was recent, because one of our priority areas was to investigate specifically the jail, the handling of inmates that have disabilities. This conversation will probably be one of many in our discovery process and trying to figure out what their protocols are, and then us deciding as a group whether we think the protocol is sufficient or not. And so in order to set the tone for that, I wanted to see if anybody had any personal experiences with our local law enforcement, because if they have policies that they're not following, that's a really important aspect of this that we need to know. So that was the reason for that.
So this is Carolyn. I don't have any negative interaction. Sorry, I just don't have anything to add. Sorry about that.
Or positive, Carolyn, if you had interactions and you disclosed that you had a disability, you know, if you were treated, if they did follow the protocols, if any are in place, we don't even know that, that would be good to know too.
Yeah, I apologize. I meant to overarch it, and I just don't have any interaction, which could be good, just considering what I do for a living, but I don't have anything to add, and I apologize.
I have a quick little input here. May not be so relevant, so let me know. But some years ago, it's a very long story, but I was stranded out in Alpine when my car broke down in the middle of the night, and we had no way for me to get home. I couldn't find anyone. Just nothing was working out. So I ended up calling police. Police showed up, and we were requesting some sort of assistance, right? And they're like, well, we just don't have any modified vehicles for wheelchairs. And we're like, well, so what happens when someone's maybe in a wheelchair like I am, a power wheelchair, you need to I don't know, maybe they break the law, whatever, you need to arrest them, what do you do? And he's just like shrugging his shoulders, going like, well, we just let them go. We don't, we can't really do anything. And so that led me, raise my curiosity. And I was like, well, if I did break the law, right, or required assistance in some way, how would they help me if I can't leave my power wheelchair? And I literally can't. If I'm sure maybe 2 or 3 officers could help, lift me up, but that would probably break a few bones here and there. And that was very scary. And I was like, well, that's very concerning, right? So maybe I would like to address that, see what they have in place for transportation, right, for someone who's quadriplegic. So,
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And sharing that story and asking that question, it would be perfect. And what's the ironic part of that, Jose, is that the county, I read all the Board of Supervisor agendas, including the one that came out today. They allocate so much money to the sheriff's department. I would think it would be nothing. A handicap accessible van costs $75,000. I would think it would be nothing for them to acquire 1 or 2.
No, yeah, that doesn't sound like a big issue. I mean, you can easily find a used van with all the modifications for like $30,000 retail, almost new. So it doesn't seem like something that's far-fetched, honestly. So
that's excellent. Okay, well, to back up a little bit, I know I'm jumping around. Is everybody in agreement that the format that we're going to proceed with will be personal experience and what's the policy, or what do you have, and do a fact-finding presentation, question and answer period with them?
Yes.
Okay, Michelle, are you good with that?
Yeah,
For
I
this
think I'm not
preliminary-
quite sure. I'm not quite sure what you mean by fact finding, but what do you mean by the fact finding?
Just like what Jose said is a great example. Do you have any vehicles? And if not, why not? Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe they'll say we don't have any money, but I'm curious. I certainly want to know why they're not providing that type of roadside assistance.
and that leads to further questions. Like in my case, like I wonder, right? So assuming I was arrested, right? I'm in county jail, or I'm locked up or whatever. Are there, for example, staff that maybe know how to operate a lift, or could my caregiver come and care for me, or would they just simply let me go? I mean, it just raises so many questions.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't that be part of the questions? I hear you, and I really appreciate you bringing this up. Wouldn't this be part of the questions that we just asked them? What do you have in terms of training? What kind of training is given? What kind of is repeated on an annual? Is it repeated on an annual basis?
Mhm.
That how, what exactly does it cover? How many hours is it? And how, what does it cover? And I'm not just talking about when they first come on, but on an annual basis. Those are excellent questions. And then you would be able to provide the expert questions of how many different kinds of lifts do you know how to use? Do you have any lift? Those are things I don't know anything about the detail part, but that's where I appreciate you being on the committee to be able to give the expert, perspective onto what options, are out there, because that's the part that I cannot provide.
Excellent. Jessica wrote in the comment section that she has friends and family members, but no personal experience, and said she believes the girls have an ADA coordinator. I'm just reading this for Michelle, because she can't see the comments. But Jessica, we talked a little bit at our last meeting about invisible disabilities.
Yeah, Kay, real quick. Sorry if my chat wasn't clear, but I was just trying to clarify that when we all agreed to share personal experience, I meant also sharing our experiences with friends and family, roommates, things we've witnessed just out in the community, if we're caregivers or case managers, if we've witnessed anything with regards to that. So I didn't want to limit it to just one individual's direct and personal experience. I was hoping by personal experience, we could broaden it a little bit.
We include all of those, especially if you're a care provider. I think that would be really important for someone who's taking care of an individual that's interacting with law enforcement who has a disability. Because
I think it's important for whatever we have gained that life experience. It doesn't have to be, I agree 1000% that it needs to be whatever we happen to know about is that questioning.
We've had a situation where I work, though I didn't handle it on the front line, but we had an individual who, a high functioning individual who is ambulatory, diagnosed with Down syndrome, who had committed a theft. And though I believe his disability is visible, you know, maybe to the average person, it wasn't. And he was actually arrested at the retail establishment and taken to the jail. When our attorney briefed us during our management session, she said they didn't show him any leniency at all. He said he liked being in jail that day because he didn't have to go to his day program. And she had to appear in court. We had to hire a defense attorney. She had to appear in court and defend him. And that was kind of frustrating for us because we expected that the law enforcement officers who would have responded to the call would have contacted us. We are, as legal guardian, would have contacted us. In that process, there was a huge disconnect in the communication between the officers on hand and who the responsible party for our client was. And that was a little frustrating. They did tell us that they have protocols in place in dealing, I think they go through PROACT training is what the community relations person told me. Because then what we did on our end, I invited all of the community policing officers for the sheriff's department and the city of El Cajon to come and take a tour of one of our homes and our facilities. So they would just be a little more familiar with our client population. And I think that helped strengthen the relationship a little. But if I remember correctly, they really didn't have different protocols in place in making arrests, at least not for people who have intellectual disabilities. And interestingly enough, Jose, what would they have done if they needed to arrest you?
That was my question. That's exactly what I asked the officer. I'm like, well, assuming I just broke the law, right? Or maybe I've got a weapon on me. I don't know. Yeah, there's many possibilities there. But let's say you did have to arrest me and take me to county jail or whatever, transport me. What would you do? And it's just like, I don't know. We sometimes have like a van that can carry people, but in this case, you know, it's Friday night, it's late. I'm sure it's not available. So he's just like, I honestly, I don't know. I'd have to call my captain, figure something out, but I don't know. And, you know, again, this is the question, because I've seen videos and how sometimes people in wheelchairs are like arrested or something, and they just drag them out, you know, from their chair, just pick them up, throw them in the back seat. I'm like, wow, if they actually did that to me, that would definitely be like life-threatening injury. So I'm like, what would happen, right? I'm not going to break the law to find out, but if I ever did, God forbid that happened. So I don't know. It's very, very, very scary.
That is scary. And invisible disabilities, is that an actual term that we can use? Do you have protocols to assist people with invisible disabilities? And the person who's giving us the presentation will know what we mean by that.
It's a very well-known term, and you can certainly Google it and find it verified in all sorts of public, private, professional, and personal accounts. That doesn't mean that the person we're talking to will know what that is.
But Adam is aware, and then as well, you can when posing the question, you can give some examples, and he's but so he'd be familiar.
Yeah. I think invisible illnesses is a great example of the overriding question, which is when and this also ties into the work that we do with the jails, because there's always an interaction with 911. Interaction with 911 that leads to that person being in custody. So it's very much a mutual thing. It's what happened from 911, police, paramedics through to the intake and jail experience. But the overriding question is, when there is an interaction with law enforcement and law enforcement is faced with an individual that does not have a glaringly visible disability. This doesn't just mean invisible disabilities, but law enforcement seems to do better when it's a very extreme and severe visible disability. What happens when it isn't so severe that they can identify, and they still need to know how to apply the legal protections and the penal codes, which do vary for persons with disabilities. They need to know in that split second how to implement disability rights and disability qualifications to include that person in a penal code. For instance, Penal Code 368 is the penal code for elder and disabled dependent adult, sometimes known as a vulnerable adult, and persons with disabilities. So the law enforcement officer on scene has to be able to qualify that person in a split moment to know whether they're even qualifying for a PC 368 crime against them. And so and I want to emphasize also, it's more than training, because they actually have a lot of great training. Training is dictated by POST. It's the organization that determines what training and holds them accountable for the training. So you guys can look up POST to see what the trainings are. There's a lot of trainings, but how many of those trainings are done, how often they're done, who in the department does the trainings, and then also, is that training reflected in the agency's policies? Are there updated policies? Is there a disability policy updated? Is there elder and dependent adult abuse policy updated? So have they updated their policies? And then have they updated the practice of those policies? Which is, how has that training and policy update led to actual, sorry, I don't have the right word, but reality in a 911 interaction? How does it actualize in a 911 interaction? And what is the culture of that law enforcement agency? You know, are they really aware, and do they really have an understanding of the disability community and the disability community needs? And do they have a real awareness of how to do that? So one of the things I think we also need to look at is something called bulletins, which happens when there's a change to a policy or a practice, or there's a new training. There's even an app for PC 368. That could be something implemented in a bulletin where they let their force know, hey, if you have any confusion about how to qualify a person as a disability or how to utilize Penal Code 368, you can have this app on your phone. Those bulletins are like the immediate guideline that lets officers know that the department as a whole and the superiors are really holding them accountable to the implementation of these trainings and policies. Sorry if that was long-winded.
No, that was very helpful. Exactly what we need. So I took a couple of notes here, and that's a really good question. Todd, do you think, can you get access to or find out if in fact there's a disability policy at the San Diego County Sheriff's Department and the last time it was updated?
Oh, he'll be able to respond to that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think.
And how do they recognize an adult as a person with a disability, as a dependent adult? And maybe elder is easier because they find out the birth date, ask the age, and there you go, bam. If the person is 65 years or older, they're an elder according to the law. If they're between 18 and 64 and they have a limitation that prevents them from carrying out normal activities, protecting their own rights, different things like that, then how are we identifying that person as such? Or how are they identifying that person?
Yeah, I wonder if they asked some type of screening or classification questions, or that's going to be helpful too. And then as it relates to the jail, I guess this is a bifurcated fact-finding session for us. One is what happens when you're on the road or you have encounter with the street officers. And the second part would be the jail intake process. And I can't remember exactly when we were doing our planning session, why we focused so much on that. There might have been something in the news at the time, but I do remember the entire committee being very concerned about the way disabled individuals were being processed at the county facilities. Does anybody else remember what prompted that?
I don't want to be the only speaker, so if anyone has any information.
No, go for it, Jessica.
So there was an audit done for our jail system, and again, feel free to just Google any of this to get specifics, because I'm sorry that with my injury, that is just really hard for me. But there was an audit in which our jails were found to be more dangerous and more deadly than Rikers. This was recent. And so
I remember what it was. Why, if they were migrating disabled populations with the general jail population, and if so, why they were doing that. I do remember that part.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that part, so that's great. Essentially, now there's a lot of lawsuits from Disabilities California, ACLU, some civil rights attorneys who have gotten together and have started suing, and there's a public campaign, a social justice campaign, and quite a bit of media on this, where a lot of why the deaths and injuries were happening in the jails that was related to persons with disabilities. And so even though the narrative doesn't say that this is a crisis of the Americans with Disabilities Act and our jails that are leading to death and injury of our disability population, nothing in the narrative says that. If you really look at the case and the dynamics, really that could be an accurate headline.
Okay, this is so good to know. This is going to be touchy, but I'm going to ask. If all of you were arrested and you were brought into the detention facility, would you want separate accommodations or would you want a standard integration?
Wow, great question.
Definitely separate.
Has to be. It has to be. Yeah.
Okay, and Michelle, having a sight impairment, would you feel comfortable being in the holding area with the other detainees? Well, this is powerful because we can come back and say the committee unanimously, those who have disabilities unanimously feel that special accommodations need to be made. And I don't think that that's happening right now. But we're going to check on that too.
I did put in the chat, but I want to add, I do think the jails have an ADA coordinator. Todd, do you know anything about that?
The ADA Title II coordinator is the individual who's going to be speaking with you for the sheriff, and the individual facilities may have other individuals, but Adam Landers is the sheriff's ADA Title II coordinator. He'll be able to provide responses to your questions.
Yeah, so maybe this is really good. If in fact, let's just say all the policies are squeaky clean and everything's updated and looks great, but there's an accommodation lack on the facilities end, that project in itself really could take us an entire year to work on. But it's critically important. I guess we need to know also, do they even collect data on the inmates? Like, do they even know how many people have disabilities when they're bringing them through the intake process? You know, and if not, how come they're not trying to capture that data? I mean, I haven't been arrested, but I know people who have, and it's pretty extensive. They get searched, they get fingerprinted, they get asked a lot of questions. So I would think at some point during the intake process, they would be asking about disabilities, but who knows?
It's actually a little deeper than that.
There's also a whole issue of that there's so many facilities, and that it may be, for example, if it's in the city jail, city of San Diego jail downtown, the sheriff runs that jail, but it's San Diego police perhaps that do the actual intake. I don't know where one begins and one ends. National City, you know, the same thing. They don't have their own jail. So that might be a question as well. Sorry, Jessica, I think I cut you off.
No problem. That's great. Thank you, Michelle. I was just adding that in terms of in the jail, are they during intake qualifying someone with a disability? We have to remember that, you know, not also everybody self-reports as having with a disability. So one of the things that I'm really trying to change legislatively and with all the intake forms that we do for people is, rather than just asking the question, do you have a disability, yes or no, you actually ask it based on the question of disability. Do you have a physical or mental impairment that limits one area of major daily functioning or major daily living? And then there's a whole category of things, which includes communication, thinking, speaking, walking, eating. But I always want to caution on just using that question, are you a person with a disability? Rather than really asking it based on the definition qualifications.
I think the better question wouldn't be like, do you require special accommodations?
Right.
And of course, one could, you know, go into detail with that. I mean, I could start and say, well, sure, other than a wheelchair charger, I would need my caregiver to help me go to the restroom, someone to help, you know, feed myself or transfer to my bunk or whatever you guys provide, or this, and obviously make a list. And then I don't know, another question is, are there always like doctors on staff, or at least like a specialist who could indeed confirm? Because I'm sure people come in, and if that's the case, everyone would start saying, sure, of course I have a disability, right? Yeah, I can't do this or I can't do that. And it's like, well, how does one demonstrate? It's not as easy as like being in a wheelchair and not being able to lift a finger, where someone who's maybe is able-bodied, you know, and maybe has special limitations that, you know, are hard to demonstrate. So
that's an excellent point. And it would be good just for informational purposes. And we know there's 18 municipalities, and I know that some of those municipalities contract with the county to provide their policing services, and others do not.
So, hey, I can tell you that there's only 9, but that's irrelevant to the jails.
Oh, so the jails, do they have, but they don't, all the 9 that have their own police departments, they don't have their own jails. They're using the county jails. Is that what you're saying?
To the best of my knowledge, it is only county and state. Well, there's different kinds of jails, obviously. There's also federal. But I'm not aware of any municipality. That's just me. I'm not saying I have not researched this myself, but I am not aware of any of the 18 municipalities having their own jail. The San Diego comes closest, and at one point the San Diego Police Department did staff that jail, but now my understanding is it's done by the sheriff, and to my knowledge all the others are done by the sheriff. Does anyone else on the committee have any other information than that?
Todd, so the Sheriff's Department falls under HHS in your infrastructure, is that right?
No, Sheriff's Department is under Public Safety Group.
Under Public Safety, okay. Well, that would actually make it.
But he will, Adam will be able to share those, that background with you.
Okay.
So Kay, I had my hand raised because I wanted to add something to the conversation about asking people what accommodations they need. I think that's excellent. That's an excellent starting point, but it can't be. And what I'll share is that I can't even start to tell you how often in my life on a daily basis I'm not aware of what I need, or what they're going to put before me that creates it. And I'll just talk about regular, very basic things like going to a conference. You know, it's like, okay, I got my friend to help me fill out the application. I've got my plane ticket. I've got my, hotel, etc. I figured out how far it is to the convention center. All of that kind of stuff. I do a lot of homework beforehand. As I'm sure you would not expect any less from me. But when I get there, constantly, there's something I had no way to know that was what I was going to need. Like even in the Democratic Party, when things were being done virtually, I had no idea that we're going to require people to put their questions into the chat. That would not be something I expect. I would have expected them to have people raising their hand, or, just things like I won't know what I need or how they did the voting. I won't know that. And even though I asked for weeks beforehand, how are you doing this? And they don't have the exact details of the answers. So I think that's an excellent beginning. And I think we need to somehow word it more generally, or maybe make the second question more general. And maybe it can't even be a question, but just it needs to be part of the training to say there are many accommodations that will be reasonable accommodations, but we will not know that someone needs that until the situation presents itself as to how we are doing things.
I'll tell you, to add to that, Michelle, it was really a powerful lesson for me when I took you to the train station that day in the rain. Because not only do you get yourself in situations where you don't know what you need to do, but what I saw you do that day was maneuver your way around all of these obstacles that should not have been in place because you were so accustomed to going out of your way and doing it. And so that's concerning as well. If there are accommodations, what type of accommodations and who are they accommodating, right? If you have the accommodation gate in place, but you keep that gate locked, it doesn't do anybody who needs that accommodation. It doesn't help them. So this will be good. And we need to know how many jail facilities there are, because I'm certain that no matter how many there are, they're not all fully accommodating. And maybe they have one where they centralize everything and everybody goes to one facility. I don't know. We're going to find out. But this is and then also getting the statistics on people with disabilities that have been in the jail is going to be important for us too, Todd. We're probably we're going to ask him that. I'm going to ask him that question. I want to know, and it can be percentage or it can be by individual number, but I want to know how many people they're servicing who have disabilities.
Todd, do you think we could get an answer next week? I mean, it shouldn't take them more than a minute, obviously, to just tell us how many facilities or name the facilities, because that's a really easy question, but that will give us an idea. Because if I know the names of the facilities, I will start asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Have an idea.
Let's see that. Actually, I think I can pull that information off the website. There's the jail, the sheriff's website has that information. I've seen that.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Boy, this has been really good. This has done exactly what I was hoping it would do. That pretty much covers everything on the agenda, unless somebody wants to add something. Yes, Miss Jessica. It's so good
I
to
have,
see your
yes.
face.
Hi, you too. I actually did a disability rights presentation to the Case Managers Alliance today. And that was terrifying and awesome. So, a lot of that strength came from my time with you guys. I want to thank everybody for the support. I have a lot of personal and professional experiences with law enforcement related to disability rights, and I felt like I had to pick one to share. And so I just do want to quickly share the one that I felt was the best one to share for this circumstance. And I'll try to do it very briefly. But a couple years ago, I was in a temporary housing situation where an apartment had been paid for me in the community of Vista to keep me safe and keep my in-home medical and caregiving intact until my permanent housing voucher was ready. Because I required the service dog and handicap parking and a couple other things. Some reasonable modification requests were made by myself and my medical team, and the property rental company accommodated. However, it changed the very small community in terms of no one there was allowed to have a dog. Dogs were strictly not allowed on the property, and it was an enforced policy. And then here I am with my dog, and some of the children's play area was taken away in order to give me a handicap parking spot. And my neighbors absolutely hated me, hated me more than I've ever been hated in my life. And all of it was based around the accommodations that really set me apart from the way the neighbor little community had existed for a long time before I showed up. And some hate crime behavior started when I would come in and out of my apartment. The kids, the teenage kids would throw things like balls and water balls at me and Lucius. Hit my service dog a number of times. He became really afraid. They would call me horrible names like Diabla Loca, crazy devil, and Weta Loca, crazy white girl. And several times they had guests over and parties, and threats were made to me like, we're gonna hurt you, but more violent threats than that. And several times I had to call the sheriff's department. Vista contracts the county sheriffs to do their law enforcement. And the officers that came treated it like a normal, just neighbor dispute. They did not acknowledge me as a disabled person until I presented them what is called the Take Me Home program. So we'll hear about this, I'm sure, from the sheriff's ADA coordinator, that they have a Take Me Home program. It was originally designed to help children or youth with autism or elderly or others with dementia or Alzheimer's, where if somebody's wandering in the community and they're found, and they're found, there's a way for law enforcement to know how to get them back to their safe location. Thus the name Take Me Home. The sheriffs are using it to give people an opportunity to assert their special needs related to their disability in the sheriff's database system. And at the time of this interaction with the sheriffs, my medical team had done the absolute best we could to have an intact Take Me Home registry. I handed a printout of my registry, a doctor's letter for my service dog, my safety plan from my therapist for a 911 interaction. And they just handed the papers back to me and said, we don't know anything about that, and we don't care about that. And we're just going to deal with this just for now, you and I. We're making the rules here. And absolutely no ability or no interest in utilizing the Take Me Home literature to understand how to better assist me. And long story short, they would not help me. They were very frustrated at me for expecting something of them that they didn't think they should be involved in or have to do anything for. And when I asked them if they could apply some of the disability qualifications or penal codes, such as 368 misdemeanor, which says that you're intentionally causing mental anguish to a person with a disability, that it's a crime. Intentionally interfering with a service dog, I think, is PC 367, also a crime. So there were penal codes that the officers could have used to protect me. But what they said to me is, we are not qualifying you as a person with a disability. You're not registered in the regional center, which is a side conversation we can have for those of you who know what that is. And therefore, you're not qualifying for these protections. Shortly thereafter, we filed grievances. My therapist and doctor got involved, spoke to sergeants, explained why I am a dependent adult and why my safety is at risk and how I can't protect myself like a normal person. And they told my medical team that they would not qualify me as a person with a disability. So I'll leave it at that. But that was one of the interactions in which I most learned. I had to move. But one of the officers also said to me, maybe it would be better if you lived in a place for people who are disabled, which was a very discriminatory statement.
Wow.
Jessica?
How long ago was
Yes,
this?
that was 2 years ago. I moved out of there a year ago.
Would you mind, I'm not asking you to make a complaint, but would it be valuable for you to lodge a formal complaint? Do you have the, or did you already?
I did, and my complaint changed from the one I sent in to one that was written by them that didn't match the 8 pages of information I provided with all of the officers' names and the dates and times. And I ended up getting a very brief response that said that they had looked into it and had found that no wrongdoing had occurred. Part of my grievance was also that when a couple of the officers said some discriminatory comments, I called back in and asked to speak to their sergeant. When I explained to the sergeant the situation, he was not interested in helping me. And not but 5 minutes after we hung up, I got a call from the PERT team telling me that they had gotten a referral from the sergeant that I had just spoken to come to my home and assess me for a 5150 hold.
Do you have documentation, any documentation that, and I can provide that to Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make this about me and my complaint because it goes so much deeper than that, but I am more than
Right.
happy.
I don't think the presentation, we won't worry about the presentation for this, but I'd like to take it offline and then see what the background is. So yes, no, you don't have to worry about the sheriff's presentation, but I would like to have this offline. So if you will provide me, I think you have my email address. If you'll provide me with the background, I will send that over. Now that I think we can, I'd like to handle that in advance.
Yeah, I will send you all the paperwork. I have a file.
Yeah. Well, I don't need all, just to really to be able to have Adam research what they have on file and then what you actually provided. And we can do that. Let's do that, like you said, outside of the presentation. But thank you for sharing.
Larger picture is they need to have some kind of checklist that is very inclusive and, includes every possible situation that our team can imagine. They need to have a set of qualifications where they can easily check. Okay, this person qualifies for protections under our laws. Our laws are great. They're just not being used.
Okay. I think that's everything. Is there anything anybody wants to add? Michelle, you still have your hand up.
Oh, that's not intentional. Sorry, that's not intentional.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, you're good. Okay, then, well, if that's it, I will compile these notes that I took, Katie. I will send them off to you. You can share them in advance if you'd like with the ADA coordinator, if it will help him prepare for our presentation. And Jose, you do bring a very good perspective to the table. And I hope, congratulations on your new job, but I hope you'll be able to make the next meeting. It would be.
What's his job?
Okay, so
I'm a cyber threat intel analyst for Sempra Energy.
can we give him a round of applause? That is a big job for a big company, Jose.
Thank you. Thank you.
Huge job.
Can he say it one more time with enunciation?
Cyber threat intelligence analyst rather.
Thank you very much. It sounds like it goes in Minecraft.
For Sempra, for this huge publicly traded company.
I'm with Sempra. Yes, I'm an SDG myself. We're down here, obviously, but yeah, very exciting role.
Congratulations. I got it that it was SDG&E.
Thank you much.
Of course you did.
I
Michelle
know
probably went to
exactly
war with him in 1968 over something. All
Now
right.
I know exactly who he's working with.
Okay, so we're good, and I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and stay safe out there.
Thank you. You too.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.